Okay, hello, and today I'm joined by Aman Negassi, who is on a mission to help people stay active and healthy in a world where most of us are sitting far too much. And what I really like about Aman's approach is that this isn't about gym routines or aesthetics, it's about function, longevity, and how we feel every single day. Aman, it's a real pleasure to host you on the pod. I trust that you are doing well today. Yeah?
Yeah, it's good to be with you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great. As I mentioned before, just off air, I think that we are really, really well aligned with our separate missions to improve the quality, well, of our lives and, of course, the lives of other people. So I absolutely love your your talk about death by desk, and I think that's fantastic. It's such a brilliantly provocative title that is, um, it's actually happening to people these days, isn't it? Death by desk. So, um, what is it that's actually happening to everybody these days that they are really not aware of?
So, if I had to start, actually, I gave this presentation a couple months ago. This was with, are you familiar with the Rotary Club?
Yeah, the Rotary Club. Yeah, of course. Yeah, yeah.
Yes. And I remember because I know that their mission involves pretty much trying to improve local economies and this, and knowing at the time before I went on a leave of absence studying physical therapy, I was looking to meet with them, see how there's a collaboration between the physical therapy organization, especially for scholarships for the students to advocate for others. And the thing is when I was giving a presentation for them, things for educational related purposes, I was like digging into the research. And one of the things that when you mentioned like death by desk, I also wanted to highlight it as an economic issue.
Okay.
The reason being is that if you look at when you kind of hear that whole like tagline breaking news, you're gonna see the news is always about, oh, the economy, like inflation, debt and so forth. But we don't ever kind of look at the other breaking news and really seeing how people have changed over it. And I think there's kind of like an imagery around it. So what I
Okay.
mean by that is that when you think of inflation, we don't really look at inflation in the sense of like how like people's shoes have changed everything, like just the amount of cushioning, even though people don't really have as much like proprioception. So I mean is like feel with the ground,
Mm,
or seeing how people have pretty much grown more weight. And
mm,
part of it is when I was actually researching as part of presenting to them, like when you look at following World War II, not just in America, but you saw pretty much to keep up with things with agriculture and what happened with the war affecting the agriculture industry. You really saw mass production that was not only happening in the United States with like ultra processed foods, but also is happening in England and elsewhere. And the
mm,
thing is that we've kind of really seen pretty much obesity change because of basically people are spending less money compared to before on groceries. So people are pretty much basically eating more, and at the same time, because of where things are as far as how the work goes, more knowledge workers and not as manual jobs.
mm.
People are not as physically active, so you've kind of seen autoimmune diseases. So that's kind of one thing what's like really happening with people because of showing from the agricultural revolution, industrial revolution, and now like technological revolution, that the trade-offs have been on one hand beneficial for us for like the rapid advancements, but we've just not really have gotten better. We haven't gotten better, not deteriorating. Basically, it's
Yeah.
unfortunately.
No, I mean, and that's so obvious because, as you mentioned, I mean, that history that you've just espoused then is so appropriate because we do know that we are all at our desks so much of the time, and yeah, and it's true that people now are just access to cheap food, plentiful food, and they're not really because of it's so much processed food as well that it's comfortable, isn't it? Just to be able to access all of that very very quickly. And yeah, no, it's that's one of the main concerns that is definitely there at the moment for sure. And it's good that you've done a bit of a dive into the history as well to see that, and thanks for the explanation there.
Yeah, of
you,
course.
yeah, you've also talked you talk about longevity, and you said that that longevity is about preserving function and not just living longer. What does that actually mean for someone in a typical job where they are so desk bound all the time?
So here's the thing, when it comes to the idea of pain, I think that really is tough because I think a big thing is when it comes to someone who's desk bound, uh, uh, when you think of somebody with like say tight hips, somebody with stiff back and everything, a lot of times people are when people feel pain, the thing is the pain, it's not always pain is a lot of times subjective. Like there's times where pain could even be pretty much more perception based, even if there's no damage to our tissues.
Mm.
So, like, what I mean by that is like there's actually a story that actually happened over 30 years ago. It was actually in Britain, the UK. There was this British construction worker. He was dubbed the boot nail guy. This guy, of all the times as a construction worker, he picked the worst time to be careless. And he basically was jumping off of I don't know where, and he apparently just like jumped onto a 6 foot inch nail that
Oof.
just went right through his boot and basically staring right at him. Coworkers basically wasted no time taking him to the ER. The doctors aren't even touching his like boot, and the guy's barely touching it, and they're screaming, telling him that oh like he's like it hurts, and so they give him they I don't know what the medication was, but they were giving him some Mizium or whatever it was, the hoping it will ease drowsiness, give drowsiness, reduce the anxiety. Doesn't work. So what they did was they gave him Proferol, I think, and this is more potent than fentanyl, morphine, 100 times more. Like the thing is, this drug actually, believe it or not, was the one that killed Michael Jackson
Oh,
years ago. Like
okay.
that would become famous many years ago because
Right.
this was in 1995. What it turns out is that after they were easing, like he was relaxed, they were removing the boot, removing the sock. Turned out it never even touched his foot. Basically, it just went between his big toe and his second toe. So and here's the thing, while this story might be anecdotal, I want to elaborate on how like the way people look at pain. Like for example, when you look at the like medical doctors, a lot of times they typically when somebody is coming in for back pain, they're going to look at an MRI scan to see if there's any abnormal findings. And usually a lot of times if you see like a disc bulge, they might see, "Oh, okay, that could probably be the presumed pain." But the thing is, when it comes to an MRI scan that might be flawed, like in the findings, is that that usually shows anatomy, not function. Because when they looked at the research of it, there was probably about a third of adults that they found have disc bulges, but have like no back pain, or even like the demolition derby, the drivers when these people are getting
Yeah.
whiplash
Yeah.
as routine, as basically for recreational purposes, pretty much. These guys basically when they were looking at their looking at the way their anatomy through the MRI, they're finding a lot of times these guys weren't reporting pain, even though somebody wasn't like in their profession would be experiencing it. So I do think that when it comes to the idea around pain for people who are desk bound, that I think that because it's subjective,
Mm.
and a lot of part is that usually a lot of times that it's more of outcome of the nervous system. It's harder for people to it can be harder for people to separate symptoms from the source. But
Right.
the good news is that the thing is once it is identified, it's easier to solve multiple problems at once because they overlap. rather than pretty much being like something that you have to solve separately, more of system based
Yeah.
rather
Yeah.
than just say someone has tight hips, somebody has like, bad neck and everything. Sometimes they could all be part of a system that if you can fix the root of it, then I think you can solve multiple problems rather than just feeling like you have to just like check off like a to-do list.
Okay, okay, that's interesting because when I've obviously checked out some of your content, I've noticed that you have you in fact there's one of the images that I saw on maybe it was on your website or one of your videos on Instagram, I can't remember, but it was a picture of a skeleton sort of just hunched over a desk at that moment because it was
Yeah,
quite graphic because and the idea for me was that obviously they do say that that sitting is a new smoking. This
yeah.
idea, I'm sure you've heard that. So I'm really fascinated that you are going into that realm of looking at how subjective some of this could be, and that we can't really necessarily know what the if the symptoms are serious or not, unless we obviously do more investigation. So you are I mean, I expected you today. I normally stand when I'm doing any work. The only time I really ever really genuinely sit down is when I have to do these interviews because I can't get my mic stand up high enough and my
Yeah.
laptop up that high. But otherwise, I mean, I would stand when I'm most of the time, unless I'm really genuinely tired. Um, but so people, you would advocate that people do maybe do exercises or something, or how do they get out of that rut, let's say, of being so desk bound and maybe not having so much pain, even if it is subjective, the pain.
Well, so just to answer your question about that, when it comes to the whole thing around what people can do, I
Yeah.
think this is actually even this is backed up from being a shadowing at physical therapy clinics.
Okay.
So when it comes to the physical, there was a physical therapist I worked with where I kind of observed what he was doing. He told me that a lot of times when it comes to dealing with insurance companies, a lot of times insurance companies are focused not on pain but actual function. So that whole thing when it comes to
Right.
what I was talking about with the different issues and everything, a lot of times with dysfunction, because the thing is, one thing about the body is that the body tends to really hide the dysfunction until it can't. Like for example, like if you have like issues with your core when you kind of like overarching, you could appear stable when you're doing a certain like exercise, like if you were like squatting and everything, but like eventually like your body can't eventually get do it for long, because when I talk about muscle imbalances, like for example like with sitting,
Mm.
one of the things is sittings is one of the examples where somebody could develop muscle imbalances. And so if anybody wants to really understand muscle imbalances, it really is when basically one joint is overcompensating for the other because it's not doing the job.
Yeah.
Say for example when it comes to like the office or work and everything, imagine if some people are basically doing more for the others and that's not even their role to begin with. Then I mean there's kind of dysfunction, and they kind of it's kind of discussed how there's different types of imbalances. Like there's pretty much for example in clinical terms like agonist antagonist. So like that one might be, for example, when you're sitting, as you talked about, when you're trying to sit up straight,
Mm.
if you might like your primary muscles could be like say your chest and then like your shoulders. Now, for example, if your primary muscle might be, in the case of what you're doing, is like your chest, and seeing about your rounded shoulders, if you pretty much find that your chest is tight, your rounded shoulders, a lot of times, if that's going to really boil over to like say tension, length and tension, because the thing is that you're on one hand like while you might have like a tight chest, but you're also having it shortened, because
Mm.
the thing is when we sit, a lot of times we see like say our hip flexors being shortened.
Yeah.
That's why when if I'm doing something like trying to improve, I'm trying to walk backwards because I'm lengthening my hip flexors again. Uh, and so when I to really elaborate, it's just that I think that when it comes to being able to really improve, like from our desk bound lifestyle, like reverse the damages, we
Mm,
want to be able to really go after muscle balances, because if you pretty much can't tackle that, um, then pretty much like just working out like after you leave, like spending hours sitting, is not going to really do much good. It might actually worsen the imbalance.
right.
So to give you an example for the audience, if they're listening,
Yeah.
like for example, when I had somebody trying this before, when it came to posture, when it comes to more of the shoulders. So like what I do is that I have the hands like almost like somebody's getting arrested. And usually what I do is I kind of have like holding them up here.
Mm,
And the thing is that, pretty much just going back, and then
yeah.
pretty much if you can really find more back your shoulder blades
Yeah.
trying to this. And so if you can really do that more repeatedly, that kind of manual therapy, you may find that, correction can happen, because there's kind of, I think, I don't remember because I have to dig back more into this, but there's a static way for improving posture and the dynamic way. A lot of times, if you're more consciously trying to like stand up straight and everything, that may be good, but it's not going to last. Like you want to really do kind of dynamic things. So
Okay.
training your mobility needs to be trained, if you want to pretty much really see the damages be reversed from your desk bound lifestyle.
Okay. No, that's great. That's a great distinction to make as well, because
Yes.
obviously I mean, I'm thinking, oh, standing, that's probably a great thing to do, because that would be the antidote to that. But on the other hand, having those little mini micro doses of movement as well is something which I have been advocating in my podcasts on a regular basis from time to time. But it's always good to crystallize and to clarify these things as well. I always find that even though I might be preaching about doing certain things, I need constant reminders myself, because
Yes.
we're all human. We're not necessarily going to follow every sort of tiny fragment of things that we advocate. So that kind of brings me to the next question, because I don't know if you might have partially already answered that, or possibly there are other elements that you could bring to the table at this point. So if someone genuinely has a packed day, like back-to-back meetings, no time, so what would the minimum effective movement they should be doing daily? What would that be? That minimum
So
movement?
just to elaborate, like how many minutes do they have in between going like meeting to meeting?
Right. Okay. Normally, if they are sitting down, probably not. Maybe 10 to 15 minutes. No more than that, for sure.
10 to 15 minutes.
Yeah.
So for me, what I would say for somebody who's like back to back meeting, and when it comes to like, depending on where they are, because I don't like to really, just apply a one size fits all
Of
to
course.
anybody. Like, if you are somebody that is pretty much just like, if you're somebody who hasn't really been active since your college days, you probably find your mobility tight. Because I guess to give you an example, I know some people who, they were playing some pickup basketball one weekend, or they were playing soccer, and they haven't done that in a while, and as a result of it, not only was taxing on their mobility, their current mobility, but they end up getting injured.
Mm,
And so to me, like the one thing that as I said before, when somebody is constantly desk bound, just be able to work out like anybody else, like you did when you were 18, 20 years old, unfortunately not going to cut it, which is why I would say for somebody like that, if they're in back to back meetings, I guess what they could do is really map out a time, like a specific block. Like they can handle their meetings, do what they're doing, but at least like if they're able to during able to stand up, moving around a little bit, that's fine. But one thing that I would say for somebody who's like not in back to back meeting, they could always incorporate like a under the desk treadmill. And so maybe what they could do is like when they're not working, they can at least like have a standing desk and at least like try to incorporate some movement.
mm,
Because I think part of it too is that
on one hand, it's important that you try to train your mobility. It's another thing that you also get your activity levels, because if you're not able to get it later on, it's important that you can kind of incorporate the movements during your thing. Now, let's say, for example, if this person has some decent mobility, say, for example, they pretty much are not too tight, they're not dealing with like any back pain, they're like still active, even if they're not as, as conditioned, physically conditioned. What they can do is incorporate things called exercise snacks. So, like, that can incorporate basically running down the stairs for a couple minutes, because even then they found in the data for exercise stats, even incorporating a couple minutes still like carry the same benefits compared to others.
Mm,
In my experience during the COVID-19, when I worked for doing like helping the Department of Health, when I was involved with like vaccine clinics, like contact tracing, case investigating, trying to contain the spread of COVID. A lot of times we found ourselves in an irregular schedule. So what I did was I trained intermittently. I basically would incorporate certain times where if there was a gym nearby or a park, I tried to use my gymnastics rings, try to do that, or get a little cardio going up like the stairs.
mm,
Uh, and to me, at least in my experience as well, and I think also seeing the inspiration from this French bodybuilder who's in his 50s and seeing he still stayed active. I don't know his last name. I know his first name was Jack S. And the thing that was unique about him is that he's homeless, actually.
oh,
This is a guy in Paris, on the streets of Paris, homeless, has a dog, and he's pretty much doing a lot of physical activity, and he still like trains intermittently through the day. So to me, like knowing the exercise snacks and the data around it, it's kind of good to see that that belief system is vindicated through data and not just
mm.
an anecdote. Yes.
Yeah, no, it's good, and from what you've been talking about as well, it's obvious that you have everything that I asked you. You seem to want to bring it back to some type of data that you've obviously come across in order to back up what you're saying, which is great because it's all very easy to talk about things on an anecdotal level, but
Yes.
on the other hand, it is true though often that we can do these tiny minute things for a minute, for 30 seconds, for 2 minutes. I mean, if you are in a situation where you could use those stairs in a building, an office block, why not? Why not do that
Yeah.
if possible? But I guess for me, one of the things that many people, including myself to some extent, but not so much these days because I have got the habit working, is that people need to form the habit in the first place. So unless it's automatic, then they're probably not going to do it. But if the more you do it, if you keep trying to do something every day, do you have any sort of techniques for forming those habits so that you are putting those like minutes in here, 2 minutes there, using your exercise rings as you've talked about as well, whatever. Yeah.
Yeah, so part of the reason that just that's a good question, especially because when you mention about like techniques, habits, one of the reasons that I called it Stop Death by Desk is because I didn't want it to just be in the realm of physicality. I
Yeah.
also wanted it to be in the realm of pretty much our mental space. I mean, it's one thing when you just have your typical personal trainer, but where's the personal trainers for the mind? And I think to me, productivity has been a lifelong obsession of mine.
Okay.
And for me, when it comes to like habits and everything like that, why procrastinating happens. And the one thing that I think has been, an inspiration for me, if you know Cal Newport, he's
Oh
kind of the
yes, of
author
course. Yeah.
author
Yeah.
of Deep Work. The
Yeah.
one thing that I've kind of looked at that's actually changed how I am is I think really reducing your dependency on phones. Like I used to be someone who might doom scroll like anybody, like the next person. And the one thing that I've kind of found, it's kind of one thing when you like I've always tried to find to reduce friction around my habits. Like for example, my phone right here, I keep it in grayscale.
Oh,
So I
good.
don't I remove the colors from it. So the thing was is that I will tell the audience I want to really like on one hand, I know it's easy to try to be optimistic, and yeah, that is. But the other hand, with you guys, if you're listening, is that this is not something that's like an overnight thing. Although, in my experience, I hope you could take from my mistakes that you can at least try to speed up the process. So
Mm.
what I mean by that is, so I can spend hours like working uninterrupted. I can stay productive, and I think one thing is that while I'm somebody who will advocate of being like sedentary inertia, I do think that there is a virtue in being bored and being able to really stay put for a couple minutes, where I think we've kind of really lost that as a species.
Yeah.
So like when I see, for example, like I mean, when's the last time like any one of us have spent like 25, 30 minutes like just relaxed doing nothing? Because actually, believe it or not, I'm going to give you a study about that
Good.
because that really no, it's seriously
No, no, that's
there's
a
a study.
surprise that you're going to give me a
Yes.
study. But no, it's great. I'm
So
just, yeah.
no, yeah, of course. So over 10 years ago, I think this was 2014, there were researchers from Harvard University, the University of Virginia. What they did was they took group of people, they took men, women, put them in a featureless room, no windows, no outside stimulation. You can't have your phones, no music. You are staying put from at the minimum 6 minutes. And they found, and they also incorporated a button for the control group where the button would electrocute you. And so they found that 67% would shock them. 67% of men pressed the button, 35% of women pressed the button.
Yeah.
And to me, what I found remarkable about that was that aside from the guy that pressed the button like 130 something times, was the fact that, people are so overstimulated that they can't be alone with their own thoughts.
Mm.
And I think also too that, curiosity will beat danger every time. But I guess to the first thing is that when it comes to people who can't be alone in their thoughts, I think that if a lot of people don't really seem to confront their thoughts. I mean, there was a philosopher that said most people rather die than think, where I think if you want to be able to change, I think you want to really first not be overwhelmed. And so if back to that whole thing where if somebody really wants to make habits stick, I think first it's really confronting yourself when it comes to anxiety. Like when is the last time anybody can really set a timer, like count you're in your head right now, test yourself like 1 minute. If you can count to 60 seconds without pretty much feeling like you need to rush to 60 seconds, then I think that it really says that you are probably very anxious.
Right.
And for me, I used to be an anxious person. And I think when I confronted that and doing that and not feel as if time is rushed, that I think it's easier to pretty much be able to fortify habits
Mm.
rather than just feeling as if, because usually you're not going to trust somebody to carry a bunch of dishes if they're already anxious to begin with versus somebody who's really calm who
Yeah.
can kind of carry the load.
Yeah, that's such a great insight. It is. It's
Yes.
because you've almost reverse engineered something which I thought a lot about. I'd never heard that take on it about the idea of, really being able to suddenly stop and count to 60
Yes.
slowly with your own thoughts. And I love the obviously the experiment that was held because that also is quite amusing in the sense that people would be prepared to electrocute themselves. So yeah, great insights on that habit forming process with bringing in the anxiety as well. Yeah, a lot of people can't do that, and it does take practice. It really does, doesn't it, to stay alone with your thoughts and not to have that temptation to be scattered, to suddenly go off, to suddenly think, oh, there's this, or be distracted by that. And it's a really good skill to well, skill. That's not probably the right word, but it's a good technique to try to master if you possibly can, because that will hopefully bring down anxiety in the process. Because forming that calmness. Good, very good. And you backing everything up with this data. I love it. These studies,
Yeah.
Harvard and Virginia University. Good. Thank
Yes.
you. Yeah.
No, of course. I guess the thing I would add to it is that I think that to me, when it comes to it, because I know it's one thing to add data, and thank you. Is that when it comes to data, that I feel as if that there's not necessarily that there's a lack of data also too. It's that there's so much data, but I don't think there's really the introspection to
Mm,
really get knee deep, analyze. Because I think that sometimes the data that we see from one end could probably provide clues, insights to another. So
mm.
for me, it's almost like, with because actually I was watching this series, Young Sherlock Holmes by Guy Ritchie, who
Oh, I've just been watching that.
yeah, I
Loved
like
it.
Guy Ritchie's the best. And
Yeah.
to me, like when I look at, like how Sherlock Holmes known for investigating things like the clues. And so like taking things together and you can't help but really just see how it works. And I think for me, part of the thing that I really owe being able to like build new habits is also the fact that I've improved my sleep so much because I think that people don't realize sometimes, like when it comes to sleep, sleep plays a lot more than just physical health, but
Yeah.
also like mentally, especially when it comes to being productive.
Yeah.
Because when it comes to habits, I think a part of it really is that if you can check your notifications less mentally, if you don't really feel the need to want to check like your message every couple seconds, every couple minutes, then it kind of shows how much your cognitive enhancement has become. And at
Mm,
least also too taking from Cal Newport, because I think to me it's just that if people are so like anxious, then I think it's really hard to change
yeah.
because you're too rigid, whether
Yeah.
you realize it or not.
I guess, and also from what you just said as well, it's also about an awareness because I've
Yeah.
noticed that myself, for example, I have gone through peaks and troughs with this, and there have been sort of periods of my life which have gone on for weeks, months, where I have felt really in the zone. And I've noticed that I will be honest, in probably the last couple of months, I have gone off the boil. I've gone into a thing where I felt a little bit more frenetic. I haven't had that sense of stillness, that sense of calm, where I've been, but I'm aware of that, and I've now had to try to find ways in order to get myself back into that zone. But it's having that if you're not aware of that in the first place, if you're just living this life in this constant malaise of fogginess and just getting through from day to day, then I guess you're not going to make any progress anyway. And I guess
Yeah.
many people would, and me included, in the past, I was just living that life anyway. I mean,
Yes.
I was pretty okay. I was successful enough with what I was doing, but internally, no, not really. And that whole thing that you mentioned about productivity in Cal Newport, and there are many other people there that would go down that route of how do you maximize productivity. I think that's also a bit of a rabbit warren in itself. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm a great thing of Oliver Berkman. I'm more realistic about that type of thing. But
Yeah.
it's a fascinating topic, and from your background, I guess, because a veteran of the Air Force, and then going into, I mean, you did data analysis, didn't you? Is that right? Data as
Yes,
well.
sir.
Yeah.
Yes.
And obviously what you're doing now, so you would have a great awareness in that area because you would have been looking at it from multiple angles anyway. So that's really
Yeah,
interesting.
I would say it's a lot of philosophy. It's just really just trying to like better like understand. I think constantly reflecting on
Mm,
it and polishing up because I mean, even then when we talk about muscle imbalances, I kind of talk about imagine when it comes to the imbalance. Like for example, imagine you can pretty much be doing well in your professional career, but then you can really see your relationships falling apart, your like your schedule, your mental health falling
yeah,
apart. Those are already imbalances. So,
yeah,
because I mean, the thing is with imbalances, there's some imbalances, but I think that when they become more disproportionate towards each other, that's when it becomes a problem.
yeah.
Where, I mean, there's going to be imperfections in our life. I think the problem that we do is that we tend to neglect it until the gaps become like more than we can afford.
Exactly. So if you can nip it in the bud, ideally, then that would be the best way to go. And having
Yes.
that awareness would obviously help that process. So That's really interesting. Yeah, and I noticed, coming on to another area that I like to explore, you are very, very strong on structure over motivation. But what do you say to someone who knows what to do but still doesn't follow through? How could you
So
help?
if someone is aware what to do, like, so when I tell, when you, I think the way you really sum it up, like structure versus motivation, I kind of like look at the whole thing with discipline, where I kind of actually mentioned talking about this, where I think to me, as I've gotten older, I mean, I think discipline is overrated. Where I think to me, discipline just seems to be, people don't realize whether they realize or not, discipline is kind of an outcome when you think about it. I mean,
Yeah,
discipline is subjective, but I don't think people really think about, delaying gratification. And I think, as mentioned with those other studies, being able to delay gratification. Because if somebody, like, as you say, they know what to do, but they pretty much tend to, like, not be able to do it. So I think that a lot of times we tend to really demonize, we tend to think that person is like lazy and everything. Where in actuality, I think that that person is really what it is I think that to me, it's being overwhelmed.
yeah,
Because I mean, I think that when someone says they're going to do something, but then they just had so much, I think it's easy to just say, diagnose it as laziness. Because I think when it comes to the whole case around procrastination, people think procrastination is laziness. When I think that, even physics terms, you think about, like, say, for example, if you see like a big piano set, and obviously without wheels, I mean, if you were trying to push it, you're gonna probably struggle to push it because of how heavy it is
yeah.
and just the inertia. Where I think that if we can really do things at a time, like I remember some coaches when they were trying to get, clients of theirs to train, they kind of really did things like in a minimalist sense. So what they did was that they had assigned them this, and then that person wanted to do more. So like I like think about it in the case of there was a gentleman that I trained. He actually has a stroke. Um, and he pretty much, if you looked at him, he was a detective, he was military, and he was known as the healthiest person that
Mm,
that everybody, his friends, his family knew. But once he was active, the guy had a gym in his own bedroom.
mm,
Um, and what happened was after his stroke, it destroyed him mortally. His morale, he was eating every fast food under the sun. Like you could
mm,
see the bags in his kitchen. But when I kind of started working with him doing things, he started to realize that his problem was that he kind of was treating, he kind of had his expectation. He was focused on perfection, but the thing was, is perfection requires expectations. Where I think resilience just requires sheer will, and I think that some people feel as if they need to really set the conditions.
mm,
They see, so like that person who might have like when it comes to motivation it might just be more structural,
yeah.
where I think just really building that momentum because the gentleman that I know, Tony, who had the stroke, now this is a guy, like, even though he had a stroke, I mean, there was a time where he fell off his bed. And usually that may not be good for the nervous system because you might like find his movement he was limiting himself, but
Mm,
he would eventually go for a 3 mile walk when I wasn't there with him. And so,
wow.
again, I would say that when it comes to productivity, being able to just make it habitual,
Yeah,
I think that that really speaks more to structural
yeah,
than just motivation. It might seem like it from the surface because I think that we kind of really get caught up in, we need to have it perfect, but
yeah,
I think somebody like that really needs to really take it step at a time than
yeah.
feeling as if that because they're probably overwhelmed.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. Actually, there's a quote that I think I read somewhere with your content, and you said,
Yeah.
and I'm reading it now at the moment. It says, "Discipline
No.
creates predictability.
Yes.
Predictability creates purpose." And I thought that was, that was really quite insightful as well as a notion in itself. So yeah, brilliant.
There's
And yeah, go on,
another, oh, sorry, I was gonna add, I
please.
remember reading too another quote that I thought would also um, be interesting to keep in mind. This reminds me from the American mathematician scientist, Richard Hamming.
I don't. I'm afraid to say no.
So Richard Hamming, I actually remember, I think he was worked for IBM. He was pretty much very important in his heydays when it comes to telecommunication.
Okay.
Pretty much involved in like applications computer engineering. I remember reading about this man because, his whole thing around productivity. And he was talking about when you lack a clear goal or purpose, there's like a tendency to work on unimportant problems.
Oh yeah.
As he noticed at the company, like not only as a tendency, I mean, it seemed to be a deliberate choice. Like, for example, when somebody wakes up out of bed, they might focus on the easier stuff to do first and not the hard stuff, where
Yeah.
by then you're already kind of reducing your bandwidth.
Yeah.
And I think that someone who's struggling with motivation, sometimes it really comes down to also your purpose, what you feel. Because to me, I kind of when I wake up, I mean, for me, I used to kind of find that my purpose was fuzzy, but now when it has an idea, like I don't feel as if I don't struggle with productivity as much. I think it's more just trying to like generate as much output as I can with the work I'm doing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, and I've noticed as well because I am rubbish on LinkedIn. I'm just terrible at because I just don't. Sometimes I don't really see much results. It's quite discouraging. But I have
Yeah.
looked at your post, and you're posting pretty much every 2 or 3 days. You'll put a post up there, and regardless, and you've got that, you've formed that habit where you're doing that, and I think that's you've obviously you have that habit and it's productive in itself, so it's good that you're doing that. So yeah, great.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, for
I
sure.
like I also think too, it really helps when you could also cut down like media consumption because I think that a large part of what's helped me too is keeping my digital screen consumption. That was kind of a part of what's changed me because even then, like say if I go back and kind of have some of those old habits, I think that the person I am now versus the person I was then, I mean, it's changed so much because I feel as if the baseline has changed so much
Mm,
kind of
yeah.
like a stock, like basically a stock. Like, I mean, no matter how bad one day might be, it's still better than your best day of the past.
Yes, yes, absolutely, absolutely. And it's really interesting because we've gone off on a complete and utter tangent from what I was originally planning to go on.
Oh yeah, I
So
apologize
no,
for
no,
that.
no, that's not at all. No, because it's fascinating to do that. And
Oh yeah.
um, but there is a question, my edge question that I'd like to ask you, which is,
Sure.
do you think the real issue is in fact the desk sitting, or is it that people are choosing comfort over long-term health?
So I think the desk might be, compared to the rest of it, I think the desk can be trivial. I think that real enemy is really just being sedentary.
Yeah.
I think when it comes to, I think the real problem is really complacency. Because the thing is actually one thing that I've actually found to researching on this is that that there was an issue in the beginning of the 20th century when I think specifically in America, when kids were being were being more put into schools, people were worried about, being like, sitting behind a desk, the school
Oh,
children, because there was actually a thing called the posture panic. And
really?
no, what's crazy is, believe it or not, not a lot of people know this, but the posture panic was actually fueled by the eugenics movement.
Oh,
So there was kind of like a racist background behind it because even you kind of saw in Harvard, they found that, a lot of these guys, like their posture was found, they found, I think almost 80% of the freshmen, maybe like the rest of the students just had poor posture. And the thing what made it crazy is a lot of people thought it was were thinking it was more just based on the economic status when no, these were future leaders. These were like people coming from affluent families. And I think even it was like uncovered during World War One, where
Mm,
a lot of people were dealing with musculoskeletal issues. And I think that to me, like when I see that, not really that there were these problems that were happening when it came to like posture was a problem then, and seeing like now, is that I just think that, when it comes to our environment, because I think it's worse today because, you have to keep in mind screen time, digital consumption, all those things where I think more people are more anxious.
mm,
That I think that it's easy for the desk to kind of get more blamed, where really I just think it's accelerating it. But it's kind of similar to what we mentioned earlier, like the
yeah.
symptom, not the source,
Yes.
where I think really we should never really lose sight of the real enemy, which is complacency. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
where I think that what we should really look at to us is, really start kind of looking at where the world was before,
Mm,
you know, where it is today. And I guess when people ask me that, it's just that, basically when's the last time you basically went to a hike through the woods, went to the park.
yeah.
There's certain days where I went without my phone because I think that, if we kind of just reduce our dependency, we still can use it, but if we feel as if it needs to control us, not have
Yeah.
control over the day, then
Exactly.
I think it's
Exactly.
easy as for us to see the desk as a problem. Or I think the desk will be a problem, but it's not as much of a problem as we think. Because
Right.
if that was the case, then sleeping would be an issue, even though sleeping, when we sleep, we are considered sedentary
Yeah.
when we sleep.
Yeah. Oh, right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
that's fascinating that you say that because obviously your whole raison d'etre in terms of what your title is kind
Yeah.
of not it's not a misnomer, but it's an entry point, isn't it? More than anything else, into a whole world to
Yeah.
explore so many other factors, which are sort of tenuously related to one big topic, which is
Yeah.
health and function. And yeah, no, yeah, I can see the connection there very, very much. And so many other factors which are important. You mentioned the digital time, and again, a point of awareness. I
Yeah.
sometimes find I'm just nipping out to the shop and I actually pick my phone up to go to the supermarket, which is like 1 minute walk from here. And I think, well, what am I doing? Why am I taking
Yeah.
my phone? It's absolutely idiotic to do that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The one thing that I do is I know when it comes to wearable technology, like I have my Apple Watch, but the thing that I do with my Apple Watch is I don't wear it as much because I feel as if that it can be really mentally taxing. And I think that a lot of times we don't want things to be mentally taxing because then I feel as if it defeats the purpose
Yeah.
when it comes to our fitness. So I'm somebody where I want a healthy balance where I can still, think metrics are important, but I don't think metrics we don't have to make a god out of it.
No, no, absolutely. Yeah, totally. And if you're
Yes.
coming into the realms of, well, I've spoken to people on this podcast, and then we've talked about wearables, about metrics, about longevity, about techniques to do
Yes.
with all the gadgets and everything else, and it can be quite overwhelming. But it all seems to boil back to those basics anyway. That you and I and many other people, including these people, they will always admit. Well, in fact, that that's only really accounts for 10% of it. The rest of it, the 90%, is the basics that you do every day. Good nutrition, good sleep, good and exercise. These are the main sort of factors. And with your background as well, with the
Yes.
discipline, that brings it all. Sorry, not the discipline, the systems, I should say.
Mhm. Oh, yes. I mean, it's funny because even I think even Napoleon himself said it. I remember reading it somewhere saying the genius is somebody who just repeats the simple things over and over again while other people are losing their mind.
Yes. Yeah, yeah, perfect. Absolutely perfect. Yeah, good.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's real power in being able to work on, something consistently over a period of time
Yeah.
without feeling the need for immediate reward. Because, I
No.
mean, if that was the case, I think a lot of people wouldn't be struggling with weight loss, fat loss,
Mm.
or
Yeah.
anything, where I think
Yeah.
that some people do it. That's why I mean, even when you hear people talk about body positivity, and then you kind of saw all it took was a miraculous weight loss drug like Ozempic, basically for some people to completely repudiate that movement.
Yeah, yeah, no, for sure, for
It's,
sure.
yeah.
Um, great. Aman, I'd like, it's been really, really enjoyable to talk to you. What is the best way for people to get in contact with you, if they want to? What's the best medium? Would it be Instagram? Would it be LinkedIn? What's your?
People can keep in touch through whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram. I've right now been focusing right now on the book. I'm currently been writing a book. That's why some of the tidbits that I've kind of discussed are actually going to be in the book.
Perfect.
And right now I've just been working on it. I'm happy to check in my LinkedIn, or if people want to check through Instagram, but maybe more better LinkedIn.
Okay.
I'll admit I'm not as religious with checking, but I still will check when I can, if people like had questions or anything.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. What I'll do is I'll leave any links that I can find in the
Sure.
show notes anyway. So if people want to do that, they can certainly check you out. And you are obviously somebody who knows his stuff. And I'm great that you're writing a
Okay.
book, as you say. I thought that I'd seen an ebook or something at some point.
There was, but I want to go more bigger, elaborate more, like an actual book and everything that I
Okay.
think really kind of just stems from not just like years of my own life. Like it's not going to be obviously focused necessarily on me, but really aspects, things about that I've learned and
Yeah.
that for me just ties into like more of a big picture. That I think to me like what I want to really cultivate about Death by Desk, because I think that there's more to it. It's like the history. And I think to me, it's for me, I hope that when anybody who reads that book can really see it as a catalyst.
Yeah.
Because I think that there's so much out there. And I think that to me, I'm somebody who's basically have been in that trenched, just constantly just exploring for 10, 20 some years and everything. And I think
Yeah.
to me, having to go through all of that and then coming out, thankfully, with a fresh perspective, enriching, I hope that I can kind of provide that what's happened to me to others.
Yeah, for sure. And it's always great because the process for you would be quite a cathartic one in the sense of you'll be taking all of your experiences, bringing in your own stories and amalgamating them with what's happened in the past. Because I sense, and correct me if I'm wrong, but you do have an interest in history and how that plays into how we are now from the past, and you can see
Yeah.
that evolution, which you've already alluded to anyway.
Well, I hope that also too, part of it is also the need to like make sure that I'm also very cognizant. Hopefully what I do is that on one hand, I know we all have our biases, but I want to also make sure that I'm not as dogmatic when it comes to things. There might be things I have, but also being able to really see if it's proven. Because I think to me, when it comes to nowadays, what I see in the fitness industry or even in the medical industry. I think that in some sense, like I'm not necessarily trying to minimize a person's work or what they do, but I do think that there are times where I think some people seem to overstep their lane.
Hmm.
And I think in some ways it's doing a disservice to people who are generally trying to solve their problems. And sometimes I think too, there's kind of a thing I've seen where in the medical field, people tend to be complex, overthink the problem, where I think that some people in the fitness industry tend to be too simplistic, if not vice versa. And so I'd hope that, taking from my background as a medic, being in medical, doing medicine, and
Hmm.
then when it comes to fitness, I can kind of really find somewhere in the middle where people can see, because my whole thing is just really making sure that person can get as much of a complete picture. And I'm hoping that even too with what happens afterwards, maybe newsletter I might do after, I think
Mm.
more people can get chunks in it, and I think can really hopefully guide them that leads them in a way because I'm not necessarily looking to be the sole conductor of their journey. I'd rather that they basically can really see and listen to what I have to say
Yeah.
if they feel if it's merited, and then see if I can lead them elsewhere too, if there's others that they would like to explore.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And I think that from listening to you today and chatting with you, it's obvious that you have a lot to give, and you've got many great insights as well. So I really appreciate your time and for sticking around, and thank you very much for everything today. And I really
Appreciate you
that's
having me.
great. So if everybody out there, if you enjoy this, please take some idea from today and try to put it into action straight away. And that's where you will see the real value in everything. So thanks for listening to everybody else. Thanks, Aman, and I will see you in the next episode of Busy Pro Fast Wellness. Goodbye.